Then Taehun suddenly pulled back his hood and stood in front of Kim Soo-ji. He requested that she gather all of the soldiers immediately so that they could make a deal.
The third part of this series begins inside the military base. Taehun and his party gather for a briefing. He proposes to the soldiers that they join him in building an organization, or they can stay and guard the military camp. He could not guarantee that help would arrive for them, as the disaster had already affected the entire country, and it was estimated that other places were not much different from theirs. And right now, communications have been interrupted, and the military has difficulty controlling the entire situation. The information was hard to digest for the soldiers, but it's up to them to believe it or not. Taehun was certain that everyone had anticipated the current crisis, but Kim Soo-ji had not yet accepted reality. However, if people quickly adapted to this new world, it would make sense that those who became skilled in slaying monsters would be more terrifying than the apocalypse itself. Kim Soo-ji then inquired of Taehun what they would stand to gain by joining his organization. Taehun promised them that they would have access to all of the information he had, which would increase their chances of survival. The following day, a truck carrying an army of soldiers ready for battle set off, with Taehun at the wheel. As they headed to their destination, Kim Soo-ji looked concerned, having just received the information. She was still worried about the problem at hand. Over her shoulder, Kim Soo-ji could see Hyun-wook educating the soldiers on the monsters, drawing on his own experiences. As he spoke, she was convinced that she would have had him committed to a psychiatric hospital in normal times. But the events of the past few days had made her believe him. Hyun-wook claims that he is the originator of the names of the monsters and the equipment. The origin of these monsters has yet to be discovered. However, the sudden emergence of monsters was accompanied by the appearance of human awakeners who were found in groups. In addition to Taehun and the others, including Kim Soo-ji, there are 2 more awakeners in the army. As long as there is a pattern, it means that they have awakened, although at first they may appear to be no different from ordinary people. The attribute value of awakeners can be increased by killing monsters and ingesting their magic crystals. Monsters have different levels and abilities. The pupils of monsters of different levels vary in color. By absorbing the magic crystal of a monster, the awakener can improve their attribute values and characteristics. The stats of the awakened beings could also be indicated through the use of a phone. For example, a goblin's magic crystal could increase the awakener's basic attribute values. A black orc's magic crystal could increase the awakener's strength, pneumatic strength proficiency, and physical defense. Consuming a black skin monster's crystal will increase physical defense at the cost of pneumatic strength. A mud beast's crystal increases health regeneration, strength, and defense, but also consumes pneumatic strength. A goblin shaman's magic crystal bestows increased proficiency and control over magic, as well as the ability to control other monsters more powerful than the awakeners. It also increases the user's awareness. Taehun's frequent ingestion of countless magic crystals led to his rapid growth in strength. He also shared some of the crystals with his companions, who in turn shared them with the other awakeners and Kim Soo-ji. Nobody ever uttered a word, because they couldn't be bothered to complain. In fact, the bodies of the monsters can be stitched together. This could bring ordinary people a lot of help after swallowing the body. Sunmi then gave Taehun a pill that she had created using the goblin shaman's horn, the mead beast's flesh, and the holy grail. If consumed, the following effects could be expected. The awakener would experience a small increase in fear resistance, a small increase in regenerative ability, a small increase in concentration during battle, and a small increase in pain resistance would all quickly drain the awakener's mana capacity. These attributes are all beneficial, but they come at a cost. The awakener must be careful not to overuse them, or they will run out of mana and be left vulnerable. Taehun then states that a professionally trained team could take on 100 goblins at once. However, the presence of high-level monsters in the group would affect the awakening process due to the roars and the sense of oppression they would create. Fear cannot be overcome by mental or physical strength alone. A higher level of energy is required to resist or recover quickly from fear. If soldiers and low-powered awakeners can resist fear, their firepower will be greatly improved. The general then instructed the lieutenant to have the soldiers take the pills if they ever encountered a monster group with advanced monsters. He also asked her to provide them with military uniforms and teach them how to shoot at a later date. Military uniforms are designed to protect soldiers on the battlefield. If they are not worn, soldiers will be easily targeted by monsters. With poor aim, they would only be a burden to their team. Therefore, it is best for them to use their abilities and only use their pistols to save lives. As Sunmi and Hyun would don their military uniforms, Hyun-wook was pleased to be wearing the uniforms he had longed to wear in this situation. He then asked Taehun if he could suggest a name for the organization, as he felt it was an important matter. Taehun granted Hyun-wook permission to volunteer, as he was the one who could make the decision. This made Hyun-wook excited, and he announced that he had already come up with a name for the organization, Dao Guang, which means the light path. As Taehun was speaking, a man suddenly appeared beside him and suggested that the organization be named Mac. Taehun turned to him, and Hyun-wook looked irritated at the interruption from a stranger. The man was from the three-man team. The man's name is Chong Sung-hoon. He then explained that the term Mac is derived from a mythical beast that devours nightmares. He expressed his desire to join Taehun's organization and assist in the elimination of monsters, even though he is not an awakener. He heard their conversation just now, and he figures that the value of the antique seems to be comparable to cutting-edge weapons. He then called Taehun his boss, and already had a hunch that their next destination would be at the Archery Museum. Taehun was impressed to hear that he's got good foresight. Chong Sung says that he was an expert in counterfeiting art, selling and smuggling. He remembered that they had worked together just recently. Taehun then informed them that they would be dispatched in 1 hour and instructed them to stand by. Hyun-wook then walked up to Chong Sung with excitement and called him a really chill guy. He seemed like a buddy to him, and that he could use some positive energy in the group. Chong Sung observed Taehun and surmised that he was not the type of person who would trust others easily. The look in his eyes told him that Taehun was much more terrifying than the monsters they had encountered before. Following the briefing, Kim Soo-ji observed Sun-mi and Hyun-wook as they conversed as if they were siblings. Hyun-wook was pleased with Taehun's plan, and the truck had aided them in passing the small monsters. From the very beginning, he was curious about what Taehun actually did. He asked the two girls if they wanted to go home. He was initially worried about his family, but now, things have improved. Even for a cold-blooded creature such as Taehun, Hyun-wook's mood swings were particularly severe every time he ingested magic crystals. He was concerned that he would eventually transform into a monster if this continued. As Taehun concentrated on driving, Chong Sung looked ahead and saw a large plume of smoke rising in the distance. The other soldiers peered out the window, wondering what had caused the disaster. Hyun-wook hypothesized that the thick smoke was caused by a fire. Kim Soo-ji rejected this theory, suggesting that it was more likely that the smoke was caused by an intentional act. Chung Sung then offered the possibility that there was an issue in the area that could have caused the smoke. Chung Sung heard that after being crushed by buildings, people suffered heavy casualties due to secondary disasters such as fire. A bit later, they arrived at their destination. Taehun gets off the truck and instructs his team to eat their pills and be ready for battle. The soldiers took aim. The commander ordered Chung Sung to drive and secure an escape route, and ordered the lieutenant to take cover. He then instructed Sun-mi to be prepared to treat the wounded, and told Hyun-wook to come with him. As Taehun waited for Hyun-wook, a pack of demonic wolves slowly surrounded him. Hyun-wook was terrified by the appearance of these monsters, which were bony creatures with huge fangs that could tear out the soul of any living thing they faced. Taehun then instructed Hyun-wook to take care of the enemies approaching the vehicle, and hold out for just 3 minutes. He was confident that Hyun-wook's abilities would be more than enough to last him for that amount of time. Hyun-wook inquired as to what his companion would do while he dealt with the demon dogs. Ahead of him, a colossal werewolf was perched atop a trash heap, howling loudly. The beast stood majestically, like a king surveying his domain. Hyun-wook and Sun-mi stared in awe at its sheer size. The immense pressure of its strength shook them to the core. Taehun then vowed to defeat this mighty beast. The soldiers inside the truck opened fire on the dogs that were trying to get close to them. Meanwhile, Taehun and Hyun-wook were at the front, fending off the creatures that were trying to bite them. The huge werewolf then leaped onto Taehun, who drew his gun. Taehun fired his gun, but the bullets missed the monster as it swiftly slid through them and closed in on him. It was too fast for him. Fortunately, he was able to dodge its slash and quickly get behind it. Taehun managed to land a few close-range shots and hit the monster a few times while he was retaliating. He noted that the monster's strength was no different from that of the monsters he had encountered before, but its lethality was greater. Taehun kept exchanging blows with the monster. After many strikes were dealt to it, he managed to get through its attacks and stabbed the beast down to its head, finally concluding their battle. Taehun and his party were relieved that the battle was over. Chung Sung looked over to Taehun and saw that he was carrying the head of the huge werewolf as his prize. The skeletal wolf's magic crystal gives these effects when consumed. It increases power, strength, physical defense proficiency, pneumatic strength proficiency, and an additional ability to use the skeletal wolf's howl. Later in the museum, Taehun ordered Kim Soo-ji and Hyun Wook to remain on standby in the truck with the soldiers. Sun Mi and Chung Sung entered the museum with him. Jae Rong was then placed in Taehun's position as commander until their return. Despite the absence of monsters in the vicinity, the captain ordered his team to retreat to the barracks for self-preservation in the event of a crisis. Following that, they went into the museum. The inside was clean and had many items hanging around, but there were no people. Chung Sung provided information about the arrow from the museum. The arrow has existed for approximately 400 years, and it appears that it has become dull over time. As the world changes, so too do these antiques. This was Sun Sin's arrow, which had a relic grade of 4 and a relic value of rare. The relic's description states that it increases penetration in proportion to the pneumatic level. It appears to be identical to a human, but not all antiques have special effects. Chung Sung remained hopeful, and said that he had something else to show them. It was said to have special effects. He had heard from a former colleague that there was a treasure hidden among the museum's halls. Although he was interested in it, the police were investigating him. He never thought that he'd finally be able to see it today. They then entered another room and saw a bunch of relics just hanging around the area. Chung Sung believed that it would take some time to find what they were looking for, given the large number of items in the room. However, Sun Mi suddenly found what they were looking for. Chung Sung was overjoyed, but Taehun blocked his way. They approached their prize slowly, and we could see that the glass case contained a golden cup. It had a relic grade of 3 and was of great value. Its effect description stated that the user would be able to dream of impending disaster before it struck. Chung Sung was amazed, claiming that the golden cup could grant its user the ability to predict the future, and that he shared ownership of the piece with Sun Mi. Later that night, as the soldiers rested inside the museum, Chung Sung snuck out to take a closer look at the cup. A pair of men observed Hyun Wook's impressive swinging power. Hyun Wook was concerned about his friends and family, wondering how they were doing these days. Taehun paused to rest while Sun Mi healed the injured men. Then, in the midst of the silence, he called his party to hurry outside and board the vehicle. Once outside the museum, Taehun and Hyun Wook prepared themselves for an imminent threat. Hyun Wook looked enraged, on the verge of a tantrum, and was about to start hitting people with his bat. Taehun told him to calm down, saying that it was not a monster approaching them. A mass of refugees walked to them, and were surprised to see that soldiers were there standing guard on the bridge. The soldiers were confused for a moment, and thought they were monsters. The people were then relieved to know that they're finally saved. Hyun Wook was also surprised to see that his girlfriend, Ju Ha-yeon, was walking among the crowd. However, before he could go to her, Taehun ordered everyone to go inside the museum first. These people were from the capital city of Shiratori, and they had all gathered to come here. It was a miracle that so many people had managed to arrive together. They informed Taehun that the capital was now in ruins, and that a flying monster was roaming the area. A guy among the crowd then added that the government had sent out fighter jets to bomb the Mapo Bridge and Yonghwa Bridge with missiles. Taehun was left perplexed by the information, wondering if these people really came from the capital. The dispatch of fighter jets indicated that the military was still operating there. Judging from the distance and conditions, it was probably the Songnam Air Force Base. He found it absurd that their solution to keeping the monsters from advancing was to blow up the bridges. Kim Soo-ji then asked Taehun where they were headed now, and how they should deal with the survivors. Taehun ordered the survivors to rest, and then informed them that he would not be accompanying them. Kim Soo-ji found it absurd that Taehun would abandon the survivors so soon after arriving. The civilians then got mad at Taehun for denying them protection. They started rioting and saying things like he's the person in charge since they also took their taxes. The others called him a monster for abandoning them. Taehun informs them that they're simply people from the monster hunting organization and not soldiers. Their purpose mainly was to hunt monsters and not rescue survivors. He wasn't gonna put himself on the line for them, and he asked the civilians if they had sacrificed anyone along the way here. After a moment of silence from the crowd, Taehun warns them that if someone dares to hinder them along the way, they can't blame him for being rude to them. In time, Taehun's impressive combat skills earned him the respect of all. In addition, in less than half a day, he taught the soldiers how to charge their phones using car batteries, how to dissect the monsters, and other useful knowledge. Not too long ago, he refused to accept ordinary people. This decision relieved the soldiers. After all, what Taehun said wasn't entirely wrong. Under his imposing aura, the ordinary people who got abandoned didn't dare to complain. But Hyun-wook tried to persuade Taehun for the sake of his girl Joo Ha-yeon. Kim Soo-ji didn't want to abandon his fellow citizens. Sunmi implies that most men can use guns while the women can do their job in handling administrative manners. Hyun-wook implored Taehun to consider their options. Taehun eventually relented and gave them a chance. After hearing their conversation, Chung-sung was surprised that he had thought Taehun would disagree. A bit later, Taehun sent the soldiers to move the monsters' corpses, and he asked all the ordinary people, except children, to dissect them within the time limit. He gives the people half an hour to cut the monsters' legs off. If they can't do it, they'll just end up a burden to him. They were disgusted at first, but to survive, they had to carry out the order, because they know they'd die if they were abandoned. 22 people passed. Chung-sung thinks he's doing this on purpose. Had he accepted their request from the start, they would not have obeyed his orders so readily. If the monster corpses could be used, then they would need a great deal of manpower to dissect them. Chung-sung thought that he was a terrifying person. He then glanced at the table and noticed something peculiar about the cup. He then hurried to Taehun, cup in hand, and informed him that the cup had somehow filled itself. Chung-sung inquired as to what his intentions were with the object. He recalled that the object was said to induce visions of the future. He then drank the entire cup until it was empty. Shortly thereafter, he began to experience intense pain and fell to his knees. Upon drinking from the cup, he immediately fainted. The people around him attempted to rouse him, but it was too late. Inside his dream, the world was in total chaos, and everything was falling apart. Taehun was on his knees, his body covered in blood. He was conscious, but he had no control over his actions. Behind him, Chung-sung lay on the ground, badly wounded. Taehun wondered if the rest of his team was dead. He picks up Chung-sung, but he insists Taehun should just leave him to die and run away. Taehun's consciousness was questioning everything happening to him. Chung-sung then adds that if this fight continues, someone else will come after him. Future Taehun instructed Chung-sung to travel to Jeonju City. He needed Chung-sung to deliver a message to Commander-in-Chief Lim Hyun-jun if he met him. Chung-sung didn't want to leave him to die alone, and that he wanted to fight with him. Taehun's consciousness was confused about what his future self was saying. An immense pressure suddenly pushed them. The future Taehun then told him to hurry while he takes care of the enemy for him. Chung-sung shouted again, urging Chung-sung to drive faster. He wanted Taehun to make sure that he returned alive. Chung-sung eventually turned the wheel and immediately drove off. Taehun then unleashed his full strength, displaying various types of weapons, and challenged his opponent. However, even with all of this, Taehun was shocked to find that even this level of strength was not enough to defeat the beast. Before him stood an almighty dragon monster, ready to fight Taehun. Taehun recalled that this was the same monster that had flown past them the other day. Just moments before Taehun was about to clash with the monster, he woke up in the present and saw all his friends surrounding his body. They quickly noticed that Taehun was now conscious and inquired about his well-being. Hyun expressed his hope that Taehun was well and informed him that he had been asleep for several hours. Sunmi was curious as to why he had fainted. Taehun told them that he had had visions in his dream. His friends find it inauspicious. He then ordered them to bring him a cup of coffee. Taehun wasn't exactly sure who'd survive, but he was very much certain that he'd die. Hyun-wook was flabbergasted by the cup's ability to grant him visions of the future. Based on Chung-sung's appearance, the event he saw in the vision had likely taken place 3 to 5 years in the future. Chung-sung suggested that they use the cup to change their fate. Colonel Lim Hyun is currently in charge of the ex-mechanized infantry cohort in Pocheon City. This is not a frontline position, and there is sufficient firepower. It appears that the troops there will continue to exist in the future. Sunmi then proposes that another organization might have been trying to get him off the grid. Chung-sung urges them to store the artifacts, so they won't ever fall into the wrong hands. Hyun-wook then assured him that they could alter the future, as they already knew what was going to happen. At the crack of dawn, a huge stampede of boar-like monsters charged ferociously towards Taehun and Hyun-wook. Taehun commanded his soldiers to prepare for battle while he and Hyun-wook dealt with the monsters. Inside the museum, a crowd could only watch in horror as the boar monsters rapidly closed in on them. Before the monsters could get any closer, Taehun used his telekinetic ability to crush them with cars, which easily stopped them in their tracks. After that, both Taehun and his companions stood triumphant, having withstood an attack from the boar monsters. But their battle was not over yet. Another stampede of boar-looking monsters charged ferociously towards Taehun and Hyun-wook. As the monsters get near in front of them, Hyun warns Hyun-wook to dodge. But little did she know Hyun-wook swings his bat against the monster's face, while Taehun punches the monster towards the ground. The citizens were amazed that they were able to fend off the monsters using their strength. Both Taehun and Hyun-wook finished the herd of monsters while looking swaggy. After a one-sided battle, the soldiers that were watching Taehun and Hyun-wook had mixed reactions. Some were amazed while some were terrified, which is understandable. The soldiers immediately spread out to inspect the dead monsters, thinking that transporting it would be a hassle for all of them due to their sheer size and quantity. After the inspection, Taehun commands the soldiers to go back to the military camp to stock up some uniforms, weapons, and to prepare a vehicle for transportation, since they're gonna set up a camp in their current location. Sometime later, the vehicles and supplies were brought into the camp. Taehun announced that he and Chong Sung-hoon will be conducting a scouting mission in the nearby area, so he assigned the remaining soldiers to guard the entrance for assurance. After Taehun and Sung-hoon departed immediately, the soldiers were still left busy organizing with the supplies. Nighttime took over and the soldiers can be seen guarding the camp's entrance. Kim Soo-ji commanded the soldiers to stay alert while a jeepney approached their ends. She immediately notices that it was their colonel's car, which was Taehun with Sung-hoon returning from a scouting mission. Upon entering the camp, Taehun announced that they had found a survivor in the nearby area. The group took her in, and once everything had settled down, Kim Soo-ji questioned Sung-hoon about her identity. Her name was Baek Ji-yeon, and she was a nurse. According to Sung-hoon, they found her when they were patrolling around Bucheon City. Both of them saw a corpse, whose head was cut off, so they thought that the monsters were responsible for it. Around the time during their scouting mission, Taehun along with Sung-hoon inspected a corpse, and was convinced that the cut was done with a sharp object, meaning that a human was indeed the culprit. Kim Soo-ji responded that anything can happen if the world is large enough. It could either be a coincidence or something that happens within the norm. Sung-hoon told her that everything he explained was just the icing on the cake. According to Baek Ji-yeon, there's another organization just like them that exists in Bucheon City named the Messiah. Their leader's name is apparently Lee Sin-sung. Their organization is several times larger than them. And to add more, they have a lot of awakeners within their members. The most disturbing thing within their group is that they would sacrifice one person to a monster called the Yellow-Eyed Devil every 10 days. They were shocked hearing about it. Sung-hoon was not worried about the group, but rather how their organization controlled a Yellow-Eyed Devil. Another story that came from Baek Ji-yeon was about the rumors of an awakened who saved the survivors in the supermarket next to the town hall, nicknaming Taehun as the Apocalypse Hero. Hyun-wook spews out some obvious shit saying it was his big bro Taehun, but was immediately interrupted by Taehun telling everyone to pay attention. Taehun informed them that he would be going alone to subjugate the Messiah, which is the organization from Bucheon City. They were confused as to why. Kim Soo-ji responds that they could just swiftly suppress them if the Messiah has bad intentions, while Hyun-wook wants to go along with him. Taehun explained that the organization was founded on fear and oppression. If they were to remove their leader, everything would collapse and become a chaotic mess. He tells them that there's no need to confront them head to head, since there's one skill he's very skilled at, and that is assassinating. After driving for some time near their destination, Taehun explained that if he did not return by the following day at 5 p.m., they should return to the military camp and move all the weapons elsewhere with Kim Soo-ji at full command. Sunmi hopes Taehun doesn't die, since she doesn't want to die by the hands of the disturbing organization. He responds with silence. As he drove towards the organization, armed men with different weapons were seen inside their base. They talked to each other about trivial things, but some of them noticed that some of their groups haven't come back yet. They thought that the reason they haven't returned is they're having fun with a woman they captured, but here's the real reason why. Taehun surveyed the scene from a distance after dispatching the enemies within an hour. Taehun got into a vehicle and drove towards the organization. The group heard the sound of a vehicle approaching and wondered if it was the scouting group or monsters, and surprise. It was Taehun inside a truck on his way to solo the organization. The organization's men prepared in a formation and questioned his identity, but it was deemed futile after Taehun drove towards them with no hesitation. He jumps outside the truck before it crashes. The remaining men tried to check the driver inside but found no one. The others were enraged, telling them that they were chatting stupid. But the moment they came closer, only one person was left standing. Taehun puts a knife right to his neck and threatens to kill him if he doesn't lower his weapon and answer his question. The hostage complies. Taehun asked him a question on their organization's manpower and firepower. The hostage answered that they have 50 people in the building, along with 60 sacrifices on the second and third floor, with the boss on the top floor. And the most important question, what does the Yellow-Eyed Devil have to do with their organization? He explains that it lives in Sinyungdong Station. The monsters surrounding it don't even get close, explaining that it was a dangerous threat to begin with. But one time, their organization's assault team went to fight the monster once, but only the leader returned alive. After the incident, their leader began sacrificing the people to the monster. He brought a group of awakeners to hunt monster cores and take it all for himself. Their leader was not human anymore. He can spit fire from his mouth, and he can also use a sword that cuts monsters in half. After explaining, the hostage offers him a deal that he'll convince the boss in exchange for letting him live. Taehun gets enraged and tells him that he doesn't want someone who'd betray their leader, so he slits his throat quickly. He puts on his mask and prepares to fight the remaining men. This is all for part 3 of the manhwa. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, comment, like, and subscribe. Have a good day and peace.